The man she called her husband every morning shook my hand in a lobby like I was a stranger. That's how it started, not with a fight, not with a text message I wasn't supposed to see, not with lipstick on a collar, with a handshake. With a stranger's hand in mine, and a security guard standing 6 feet away looking between us like he was watching a bomb count down to 0. I want you to stay with me through this whole story, because I promise you the part that broke me wasn't what you think it is. Drop a comment right now and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to know how far this reaches before it's over. My name is Raymond. I'm 58 years old. I spent 32 years as a structural engineer in Atlanta, Georgia, building things designed to hold weight. Bridges, parking structures, hospital foundations. I understood load-bearing capacity in ways most people never think about. What I did not understand, apparently, was the load my own marriage had been placing on a structure that had already failed its inspection years ago. My wife, Diane, had been CEO of a healthcare technology company called Vantage Systems for 4 years. Before that, she'd been climbing steadily VP of Operations, Senior Director, Regional President. I'd watched her ascent from a respectful, admiring distance, the way you watch someone run a marathon they've been training for their whole life. She was brilliant. She was disciplined. She was, I believed, with the kind of certainty that only 30 years of shared living can produce, entirely mine. That Thursday in November, she had rushed out of our house in Buckhead before I was even fully awake. She'd forgotten her scarf, the burgundy cashmere one I'd bought her in Savannah 3 winters ago. I found it on the kitchen chair. I thought bringing it to her, along with the good coffee from the place on Peachtree she actually liked, would be a small kindness on a gray morning. That was the whole plan. A scarf and a coffee. I hadn't been to her office more than a handful of times. She liked to keep work and home in separate compartments, and I'd always respected that. Looking back now, I wonder how much of my respect was actually just incuriosity. How many doors did I never open simply because no one told me I should? The Vantage Systems building sat in Midtown, all glass and polished granite, the kind of building that makes you straighten your posture just walking toward it. I carried the coffee and the scarf through the revolving doors and approached the reception desk. The security officer, tall man, silver hair at his temples, name tag reading Jerome, looked up from his monitor. "Good morning," I said. "I'm here to see Diane Ashworth. I'm her husband, Raymond." Jerome's expression did something I wasn't prepared for. It didn't go cold or professional or suspicious. It went confused. Genuinely, almost comically confused, the way a person looks when someone says something that doesn't compute. He tilted his head. "You said, you're Mrs. Ashworth's husband?" "That's right. Raymond Ashworth. I just wanted to drop something off." Jerome looked past me toward the elevator bank. His eyes settled on something, and then he laughed. Not meanly, not cruelly. He laughed the way a person laughs when they realize they misheard a joke. Easy, unbothered. "Sir, I'm sorry, I see Mrs. Ashworth's husband every single morning. That's him right there, coming back in." I turned. He was coming through the side door from the parking deck, tall, maybe late 40s, wearing a charcoal overcoat and carrying what looked like a stack of folders. He moved like someone who owned the square footage he occupied. Unhurried. Confident. His eyes swept the lobby and landed briefly on me, and in that half-second of eye contact, I saw recognition. Not surprise. Not guilt. Recognition. He already knew my face. He nodded at Jerome. "Morning, Marcus. Diane asked you to send those contracts upstairs?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Calloway. She's finishing her 8 o'clock. Marcus Calloway. I knew that name. Diane had mentioned him, the way you mention weather, incidentally, matter-of-factly. Her new chief strategy officer, brought on about 2.5 years ago. Brilliant guy, she'd said once. Really understands where the industry is going." My hands felt like they belonged to someone else. Every trained instinct in me, and I am an engineer, I am someone who locates the fault before the collapse, not after told me not to speak. Not yet. The lobby was not the place. Jerome was watching. Marcus Calloway was watching. And something cold and precise inside me said, "You need information more than you need to be right." "Sorry," I said to Jerome, smiling as naturally as I could manage. "I think I've got the wrong floor. I'm visiting someone in the building next door." I held up the coffee. Completely my mistake. Jerome relaxed, nodded, went back to his monitor. I walked back through the revolving door. The November air hit my face like a flat hand. I sat in my car for a long time. 30 years. 30 years of Saturday morning breakfasts, and inside jokes, and the specific way she hummed when she was pleased about something. 30 years of knowing exactly how she took her coffee, and which side of the bed she couldn't sleep without, and what her face looked like when she was trying not to laugh at something she thought was inappropriate. I had built my understanding of this woman the way I built everything carefully, methodically, with attention to load and stress and the small signs of strain that precede failure. And I had missed every single one. That evening she came home at 9:15, apologizing for the late hour, asking if I'd eaten, kissing my cheek in the kitchen doorway. I watched her move through our house with the ease of someone completely comfortable in her deception. I said almost nothing. She didn't notice. That told me everything I needed to know about how invisible I had become in my own life. I didn't confront her that night. I'm going to be honest with you, part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to stand up from that kitchen table and say the man's name out loud just to watch her face. But the part of me that had spent 3 decades looking at structural drawings before touching a single beam said, "Not yet. Get the full picture first. You cannot fix what you don't fully understand." Over the next 4 days, I became a detective in my own home. I was not a suspicious man by nature. I had never gone through Diane's phone, never questioned her about her schedule, never doubted her explanations for anything. That trust, which I had always thought of as a gift, was something she had been treating as a resource to extract from. The credit card statements told the first part of the story. I'd always trusted her with our finances. She was the one with the financial background, and my practice had been primarily focused on engineering, not money management. But sitting at the kitchen table with 3 years of statements spread in front of me, I started to see the architecture of a parallel life. Dinners at restaurants I'd never visited. Hotel charges on weekends when she'd told me she was at industry conferences. A recurring monthly payment to a management company called Harrington Realty. I looked up Harrington Realty. Property management. Primarily residential. Primarily in the Inman Park neighborhood. About 20 minutes from our house. The second key came from the junk drawer, the place where batteries go to die and takeout menus accumulate and things that don't have a home get placed temporarily and then forgotten forever. It was a brass key, worn smooth at the edges, attached to a small tag from Harrington Realty. Unit 318. I sat with that key for a long time, turning it over in my palm, the way you sit with a test result you're not sure you want to read. Then I drove to Inman Park. The building was a restored warehouse conversion, exposed brick, high ceilings, the kind of place that costs real money and knows it. I sat in the visitor parking for 12 minutes. Then Marcus Calloway pulled in, stepped out of a dark blue Range Rover carrying dry cleaning and a grocery bag, and walked to the entrance with the easy gait of someone coming home at the end of a long week. I waited. Then I went inside. The key worked on the elevator. The key worked on the door to Unit 318. And what I found inside that apartment made the lobby moment feel small by comparison. This was not a hotel room. This was not a love nest. This was a home. Deliberately, completely, comfortably, a home. Books on shelves arranged by color. A throw blanket I recognized, the one Diane had said she'd donated to a church drive 2 years ago, folded over the arm of a linen couch. Her perfume on the dresser in the bedroom. Her reading glasses on the nightstand. Her handwriting on a notepad by the kitchen phone that read, "Call Dr. Ferris Tuesday." Her clothes in a closet next to his. I stood in that closet doorway for a long time. The weight of it was physical, like standing under a structure that is telling you, in the language of tremors and creaks, that it has already decided to come down. On the kitchen counter, inside a manila folder, labeled simply with her initials, I found the document that reframed everything. It was a legal consultation summary from a firm called Whitfield and Cross Atlanta's most respected divorce attorneys, as it happened. Diane had met with them 4 times over the past 5 months. The summary outlined what they called an optimized dissolution strategy for a high-asset individual seeking to exit a long-term marriage. The strategy involved establishing documented patterns of emotional distance, of professional incompatibility, of what the lawyer carefully called lifestyle misalignment. According to the document, her primary asset protection plan depended on my being characterized as a spouse who had gradually withdrawn from the emotional and social demands of the marriage, a man content to coast while she continued to grow. My contentment, my peace with our quiet life. I photographed every page. I photographed the closet, the nightstand, the grocery receipt on the counter in his handwriting. I photographed the vacation brochures in the folder, Italy, New Zealand, a wine region in South Africa. I'd once mentioned wanting to visit someday with her destinations she'd apparently decided to visit with someone else. Then I drove home and cooked dinner and waited. If you've ever held a secret that changes everything, you know what the next several days felt like. You move through ordinary moments, coffee, the morning news, a question about dinner plans, and each one carries the weight of what you know and aren't yet saying. I want you to understand, I was not quiet out of cowardice. I was quiet because I had spent 30 years building things that lasted, and I was not going to let this moment collapse before I had the foundation right. The confrontation came on a Sunday morning. Diane was at the kitchen island in a pale robe, scrolling through her phone, coffee in hand. The light through the windows was soft. She looked, in that moment, like the woman I had married, unhurried, composed, beautiful in the particular way of someone who has always known exactly what she wants. I placed the folder on the counter between us. She looked at it. She looked at me. For a fraction of a second, her composure flickered, and what I saw in that flicker was not guilt. It was calculation. The rapid, practiced calculation of someone deciding how much to concede, and how quickly. "I found the apartment," I said. She set down her coffee mug with deliberate care. "How much do you know?" Not denial, not explanation. An assessment question. "How much do you know?" "All of it," I said. "Marcus, the apartment, the divorce strategy, the legal consultations, the 2 years of documented evidence you've been building to make me look like the problem." She nodded slowly. The warmth in her face, the warmth I had relied on like a structural beam, was simply gone. In its place was something I can only describe as professional. She was in a meeting. I was a difficult agenda item. "I suppose this accelerates things," she said. "Accelerates things." I heard my voice come out very quiet. "Diane, we've been married 30 years, and for at least 5 of those years, we've been 2 people who stopped growing in the same direction. You know that, Raymond. Don't pretend you don't. I want to stop here and tell you something. This was the moment that almost broke me, not the apartment, not the key, not the legal documents. This moment, because she said it with such calm certainty, as if she had rehearsed it, and also as if it were simply, finally, true. And I had to sit with the question, was some part of her right? I had been content. I had been steady. I had built a life around stability and reliability and the kind of love that shows up consistently rather than spectacularly. I had never been ambitious the way she was ambitious. I had never needed the room to get bigger. Was that the same thing as failing her? I don't think it was. But I sat with the question, because it deserved to be sat with. "You could have talked to me," I said. "I tried, Raymond. You weren't interested in changing. You never told me the marriage was ending. You told me you were at conferences. You told me dinner was with clients. You looked me in the eye and said things that weren't true. For years, while building a legal case to take the house and the retirement accounts and my reputation as a husband." For the first time, something shifted in her face. Not remorse, exactly. More like the mild discomfort of someone who has been caught taking a shortcut they believed was justified. "The legal strategy was defensive," she said. "I needed to protect myself. You were protecting yourself from me before I even knew there was a fight." She stood up and moved to the window, a gesture I recognized from 30 years of watching her think. She stood like that in front of boardroom windows, in front of kitchen windows, every time she was about to deliver a conclusion she had already reached. "Marcus is everything you never wanted to be," she said, and her voice carried the careful neutrality of someone reading from a prepared statement. "He wants to build something. He wants to expand, to travel, to take risks. He makes me feel like the future is actually worth running toward. With you, Raymond. With you, I always felt like we were protecting what we had, and somewhere along the way, that stopped being enough for me." I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said, "You could have told me that. 5 years ago, 3 years ago, even 1 year ago. You could have said, 'Raymond, I want more than this, and I need you to want it too, or I need to leave.' And I would have heard you. I would have tried. Or if I truly couldn't give you what you needed, at least we would have parted honestly." She turned from the window and looked at me, and for just a moment, one unguarded moment, I thought I saw something real cross her face. Something that might have been grief for a version of this story that never happened. Then it was gone. "I've already spoken to the attorneys," she said. "I'd like to handle this as smoothly as possible. I'm planning to file by the end of the month." And that, right there, is the moment I stopped being the man she had miscalculated me to be. I contacted my own attorney the next morning, a woman named Patricia Osei, whose reputation in Atlanta family law was as solid as anything I'd ever built in steel and concrete. When I spread the documents across her conference table, she went very quiet. And that quiet was one of the most satisfying sounds I had ever heard. "She built this case for 2 years, Patricia said, assuming you would be uninformed when the papers arrived. The fact that you know everything, and you have documentation of your own, changes the entire equation." I told her about the Harrington Realty Payments joint marital funds, used to maintain an apartment for her affair. I told her about the credit card charges. And then I told her the part that even I hadn't fully processed yet, what I'd found in the corporate documents. Because the engineer in me had spent 3 evenings reviewing Vantage Systems' publicly available filings. And what I found there was that Marcus Calloway's rapid rise to Chief Strategy Officer had been accompanied by a series of operational restructuring decisions that should have required board approval decisions that had never been formally presented or voted on. He had been given decision-making authority over divisions he had no documented mandate to govern. The reorganization that Lauren had outlined in her future plans folder, positioning herself as executive chair while Calloway assumed the CEO role, had been partially implemented already, in a way that the board of directors apparently didn't know about. I called the board chairman, a man named Gerald Forsyth, whom I had met twice at company events. I kept the call factual. I said nothing about my marriage. I described what I had observed in the public filings, the apparent gap between documented board authority and operational reality, and I suggested the board might want to conduct a governance review. Gerald Forsyth said almost nothing on the call, but 2 days later, Vantage Systems' general counsel sent a letter to Diane's office. That evening, she came home for what would be one of her last evenings in that house, and the composure she had worn like a second skin was cracked at the edges. You called Forsyth. I shared factual concerns about corporate governance with a board member. You're trying to destroy my career. You tried to destroy my reputation as a husband in a legal document. You just hadn't filed it yet. She stared at me for a long time. And in that silence, I think she finally saw me, not the Raymond she had decided. I was steady and passive and easily managed, but the Raymond I actually was. Someone who had spent 30 years learning how structures fail. Someone who knew, better than almost anyone, that the quietly accumulating stress is always more dangerous than the dramatic crack. What do you want? She asked. I want a fair settlement. I want the truth on record. And I want you to understand that I was never the problem you wrote me up to be. The governance review at Vantage Systems concluded 6 weeks later. Marcus Calloway's position was terminated immediately upon disclosure of his undisclosed relationship with the CEO. Diane retained her role, but under a restructured oversight arrangement that stripped her of unilateral decision-making authority. She was, for the first time in years, accountable to people she could not charm her way around. The divorce was finalized 4 months after I filed. Because I had filed first, because the documentation was thorough, because adultery and misuse of marital assets were on the record, the settlement was fair in a way Diane's original strategy would never have allowed. I kept the house. We divided the retirement accounts equitably. The money she had spent maintaining a secret life with Calloway was factored into the asset division. Marcus Calloway took a position in a smaller firm in another state. Diane moved to a condominium near her office. The apartment in Inman Park, the home she had been carefully building while pretending to live in ours, was quietly surrendered. I am not going to tell you I felt nothing when I learned these things. I felt something, but it wasn't triumph. It was closer to the feeling of watching a structure you've been worried about finally come down in a controlled demolition, rather than a catastrophic collapse. Sad, inevitable, cleaner than the alternative. What I felt most was lightness. I want to speak directly to you for a moment, because I think this story is about something beyond betrayal. I think it's about the cost of contentment in a culture that has decided contentment is failure. Diane saw my satisfaction with our life as evidence of limitation. She saw my steadiness as stagnation. She took the things that made me a good partner, reliability, loyalty, a willingness to give space, and converted them, in her own mind and in her legal documents, into the reasons she was justified in leaving without ever giving me the chance to respond. If you have ever been told that your quiet happiness was holding someone else back, I want you to hear this. That is not the same as failing them. Contentment is not cowardice. Loyalty is not weakness. And the person who cannot distinguish between your steadiness and your stagnation was never going to tell you the truth about what they actually needed. The mistake most people make in this situation is waiting too long to stop being understanding. I was understanding for months, years, probably while someone used my understanding as cover for a plan I didn't know existed. There is a version of love that enables and a version that protects, and learning the difference is one of the most expensive lessons a person can acquire. This story taught me that the most dangerous deception is not the dramatic lie. It is the slow, patient rewriting of shared history until you can no longer trust your own memory of what was real. Ask yourself this. Is there a relationship in your life where you have been giving someone the benefit of the doubt for so long that you've stopped asking whether the doubt was ever warranted? Sit with that. 6 months after the settlement, I had coffee on my back porch on a Saturday morning, just me, the birds, the October light on the garden I'd replanted by myself. A woman I'd met through an old college friend sent me a message asking if I'd be interested in meeting for dinner. Her name was Cecile. She was a retired architect. She liked to cook and hated small talk, and had built 3 houses from scratch with her own hands after her own marriage ended. We've had dinner 4 times now, and every single time she has looked me in the eye when I talk and asked the kind of questions that assume I have something worth saying. I had forgotten what that felt like. I don't know where this road goes, but I know I am on it with my eyes open, which is more than I could say for the last several years of what I thought was my life. If this story hit something in you, a memory, a recognition, an anger you've been carrying quietly, I want to hear from you in the comments. Type 1 if you think I should have confronted her the moment I walked out of that lobby. Type 2 if you think I handled it exactly right. Type 3 if there's something you would have done differently, and tell me what it is. I read every single one. And tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. I genuinely want to know how far this reaches. If you've had something like this happen to you, if you've ever been the last to know something that everyone else seemed to accept as obvious, leave that in the comments too. You are not alone. Not even close. If you're new here and this story stayed with you, please consider subscribing. I tell stories like this because I believe they matter, because the things that happen in private have lessons that deserve to be public. I'll see you in the next one. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Atlanta, Georgia to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is entirely coincidental.